Hey guys, so for those of you who don't know, I have a series over on my TikTok where I turn my followers' profile pictures into monsters. And honestly, it's a pretty fun series. And I had this one longtime viewer of mine ask me to do hippopotamus for him. And like, let's face it, hippos are pretty cute animals. But you have to be able to admit, their skulls are frankly terrifying. So let's turn a hippo skull into a monster somehow. So just like for every project we start off with, that we're going to use a spear and then just use a mix of the move brush, the clay brush, as well as a carve and just a few other bits and pieces to really start giving the basic primary forms to it. Yeah, that's how I start off every single one of my projects. No matter what video you look at, this is always the basic fundamentals of it. And this is a stage. You're basically just building up the primary and some of the secondary forms, just to really level out the entire foundation of what you're doing. So whilst you're at this stage, and basically throughout your entire artistic process, I really recommend having some form of reference image to hand, just so you're able to dot back and forth between what you're doing and what it's supposed to be looking like, as well as just throwing in your own little creative flair here and there. Because a lot of what artists do is just take the world they already know and then shift it to create their own. Because, let's face it, there's no creature alive that will sort of just have this skull as the head itself. And that's what we're going to be doing here. So you have to be able to understand, okay, yeah, we have to be able to edit this to make it work for X, Y, and Z. Because as an artist, a lot of what you're doing is just helping bring life to something that does not exist, especially in creature design. Another thing I really recommend, especially in the earlier stages like this, is to try to keep your resolution as low as you can, just so you're able to have more control. Because at a lower resolution, say a single brush stroke is worth a lot more than what is in a higher resolution. Because at the higher resolution, that's where you're going to want to start trying to doing all your little finicky details. But when you're trying to move large shapes and just alter them to fit your needs, that's when you're going to want to have it all lower, because it just makes your life so much easier. Trust me. Whilst working, I also like using multiple subtools just to be able to have a lot more control on what I'm working in, because the upper skull as well as the lower mandible are both separate pieces, so that allows me to sort of edit them a lot easier, to have a bit more of a finite control, as well as being able to shift it. I'll be doing that a bit later, just so you'll be able to open sort of the maw a bit more. As well as it's a lot easier to start building the body, like what I'm doing now, if you're using a series of different tools instead of just all trying to stretch out to one. Yes, you're able to do it as one tool, but you're gonna lose a lot of that fine control, especially if for bodies. Think of it, your arm in particular. It's primarily 4 different shapes: your hand, your forearm, your bicep, and your shoulder. Those are the 4 main elements to making any arm. As well as surprisingly, most other animals do follow a very similar structure, as well as most bodies being an upper body, a mid-torso, and sort of the lower waist. Those are the 3 major areas, as you can see what I'm doing here. And by having these as individual pieces, you're able to edit them as you wish to sort of form a lot more of a cohesive flowing thing, instead of just trying to awkwardly stretch it out there. Because if you look at the arms for how I'm having them, they just don't really work as being just stretched out little things. They look kind of goofy, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of love having goofy design halfway through to just fairly whimsical, because hey, who doesn't love whimsy? So in my last video, people told me I didn't really explain what I was doing or the actual process too well at points. So what I was doing here is I used a insert tool to build a cylinder, and then I used a trim tool to carve out a bit more of a tooth, as well as mirroring it locally instead of worldwide, because there are 2 different symmetry options on Nomad. So I'd be able to shape this on both sides pretty easily, as well as it being a primitive object. I was able to mirror it to have it then work on both the left and right side. I then later added a curve multiplier, what you'd be able to find in your additive things, to then sort of add a repeater to then just have all those teeth done fairly quickly, because having to sculpt and move and place every single particular tooth is such a pain. I used to do that beforehand before I knew how to do that. So it was a bit of a nightmare, and such a godsend when I actually found that out. As well as once you have your thing situated, you're then able to go on the clone button, what's on the left-hand side of the screen when you have your gizmo up, and then move it just to create a lower set of teeth, because we're able to have the mirroring. This isn't a complete dental work of it. So you're able to have just some repetition of the sculpt itself, just to make your life a bit easier. And this all just goes back to the point of how you're making something. It really depends on what you're making it for. If you're trying to go for say a David Attenborough style documentary, a recreation thing, yes, a lot of these accuracies are going to be very important. But if you're sort of just doing it for a fantasy setting, just doing something for some fun, yeah, do what you want to a certain extent. Just make it seem believable enough. So what I'm now doing is using the insert brush to insert a cylinder. Yeah, just like I did beforehand. Just to give a lot more shape to the leg. Just to give it a nicer flow to it, because of how I had them beforehand, it would have taken forever just to get them into like a position I wanted. As well as by doing it like this, it's easier to sort of add like the hinges and just joints to it. Like the difference between like the sort of bicep, sort of part of the arm versus like the lower forearm and hand. It's a lot easier to do it like this, as well as it's easier to just then throw it on repeater on the back. So how the legs are, since the hippo isn't really a sort of like fast charging animal, that's why I'm having these legs sort of like very straight and stocky. Yeah, because I don't know, I just like the idea of this thing's not really moving around much. It's sort of just like it will chomp at you here and there. But it's kind of fun, like in itself, because a lot of what I love doing whilst ever I'm designing a creature or something is sort of just like trying to imagine how this would be like working in some form of ecosystem. As well as like most creature designers, so like that's actually one of the most fundamental things that people try to hammer into you. We're just like understanding how something works, and then sort of like making it seem believable in the setting you want. Also, here's a really good tip for you if you're trying to like establish a creature that is supposed to come off as fairly large. A good way to do that is either have like head really small compared to the rest of the body, because that will make it seem like, oh yeah, the body is like that titanic. Because say for people in particular, the human body is normally composed of like say 6 to 8 heads or so. Well, so anything within that region, like it seems like it will be fairly natural. But say the body is like 9 heads worth, but the head remains like a normal head size. Like that body is going to seem a lot larger by comparison to like what you're used to seeing. So another fun way is to also like determine the size of eyes, because eyes typically don't really like deviate in size too much from species. So if something has like a pretty small eyes but giant head, it makes it seem like they're pretty bigger than what they actually are. Yeah, so despite like this being, the head is making up like a good third of the body proportions, I'd say, it still does seem like a relatively like large in comparison to what it would be. Like I feel you wouldn't be surprised if like a human's able to stand at eye level to it, but also be like dwarfed by the sheer girth of it. So now I'm working on the appendages. Since the top half is fairly spiky from like the head itself, as well as those giant like arm shoulder blades. I don't know why I gave it to those. I just thought it would look cool, and you know what? I stand by that. It was fun, as well as the sort of rigid spiky spine. Yeah, since like that's very top heavy spikes, it makes more sense to me that like the bottom half, say the feet in particular, would be more to do with just flat, stocky, sort of like more grounding feet. Because this is like still based upon a herbivore sort of animal, so it makes sense that like everything it has on top is more of a defensive thing instead of like an actual prey devouring like other animals sort of thing. Like it doesn't have claws to actually rip things apart. It has like all these spikes to sort of just like intimidate and scare off bigger predators. Because this is also another factor you should be thinking of when designing creatures. Like, where does this actually exist in the ecosystem? Like, this is not going to be an apex predator for like the world I'm imagining it for. And no, it's more of like a territorial like herbivore that it has to fend off at like some pretty intense predators. Like, and maybe at some point in the future, I would like design some like sled predators that may be existing in this world with them. Because honestly, I did have a lot of fun doing this guy. And like I like love doing creatures, so I may start doing my own little bestiary of sorts for like some of these things. Okay, now that I've said that out loud, that actually does sound like a pretty fun idea. Hey yo, I'm gonna start doing a bestiary, you guys. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. So if you would like to stay tuned and actually see me create my own bestiary, remember to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. I also have a TikTok, what may be worth checking out, because I'm a bit more active on there. Especially for live streaming. Like, funnily enough, I actually did make this guy on a live stream with a bunch of like my viewers, and that's honestly a really fun experience. So if you happen to have a TikTok, please stop by it sometime. I try to go live at least once daily. I'm gonna also try and do more stuff on YouTube, live streaming wise, but like my laptop is on the verge of death, so heyo. But back to the work itself. But for this design, if you haven't noticed it, like the focal point is 100% the head. That's why I'm spending a lot more time detailing that out, as well as letting the rest of the design seem fairly muted by comparison. Like that is fully a deliberate thing, because throughout every design, even if you don't really think about it, there are always going to be some form of focal point. So For example, something what does a creature design focal point so really well is just the entire Monster Hunter franchise. Because if you look at any one of their monsters, let's say for example, Brachydio, so the giant explosive like dinosaur what boxes you, you're gonna tell like, okay, these giant green glowing parts on his fists like he is attacking you with it, you definitely watch out for it. But oh wait, he also has this giant tail, what looks like it would do a lot of damage if it like hits me. So you're going to want to avoid that. And that's how like you use focal points of design really well, especially in games, and just to give an audience the idea of like, yes, this is what you should be paying attention to a majority of the time. And that's something I still need to master a bit, because I tend to go a bit too all over the board, all over the place with design, so it gets kind of muddy. So this is something I'm still actively learning, so stay with me on this journey so I can actually improve all of this and just become a better creature designer at the end of the day. Because this is definitely something I love doing and something I actually really enjoy sharing with the world. So the better I get at it, the better it is for you guys to actually see it. So yeah, it's sort of like a win-win sort of situation. And just to start a dialogue, I'm actually really curious to hear what you guys think actually really makes a good creature design and what happens to be some of your favorite. Like, say personally, I'm a giant fan of anything from Guillermo del Toro, like say Pan's Labyrinth, Pacific Rim, just stuff like that. But like, I kind of want to hear your takes, because there's a lot of like media I haven't actually come across that what actually probably does have some really cool stuff. So if you have anything you'd like to share, yeah, please just comment it down below and let's actually start a conversation about this sort of fun stuff. So if you made it this far into the video, I'm really thankful for you continuing to watch to this point. It's been a lot of fun making this, and hopefully you guys have also enjoyed it. And yeah, I promise more content will be on the way. Yeah, this is definitely gonna be like a learning curve, because I'm more used to TikTok short form top content. And like just talking about what I'm making is always a bit weird. It kind of reminds me of back when I was at school. So yeah, once again, thanks, and hope you guys have a great day, and stay tuned for more. Because who doesn't love random fantasy creatures? Because, life's boring, so let's try and make it a bit more exciting, you know? Peace out, homies.